Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. John Middlekauff's about to stop by, but before we start with John, grab your smartphone, download the Game Time app. It'll take 90 seconds tops. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks. Makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff. Only the incredible deals on great seats is what you see, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time as well. Download the app, create an account, use my name Colin, C-O-L-I-N, for $20 off your first purchase. The redeem code again, Colin, C-O-L-I-N. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, we're going to have a lively one here on Sunday. John Middlekauff, our week 2 reaction presented by Uber Eats. Get almost anything for game day. Former NFL scout John Middlekauff as we start today. Let's start Kansas City, Cincinnati. You know, it's funny. I've argued this forever that Bill Parcells used to ride Phil Simms. Phil, throw it down the field. Okay, I'm not interested in, one interception, no picks. Today Mahomes has 2 ugly picks, almost had 3. Burrow has none, and Kansas City wins. And by the way, in his opener against Baltimore, it was one of the ugliest picks, not named Will Levis, Mahomes against Baltimore. And it's funny about Kansas City is that, we think of Kansas City as so efficient, but they make a lot of mistakes, John. They are vulnerable. They give you opportunities, but they're always usually good starting a game and finishing. In the middle of it, it can get choppy. But once again, late, like against Baltimore, they finished Cincinnati off. I felt terrible for Cincinnati in a way because at one point in this game, they put up a graphic that the last 6 matchup between these two teams, Bengals-Chiefs, they'd each scored 150 points. Like,
crazy.
It is so even. But I guess my takeaway is Cincinnati can go toe-to-toe with Kansas City forever. But Kansas City has this ability to start and end quickly, and they're a flawed team, right? Like when I watch them, I think, God, they give you opportunities, don't they?
Well, big picture, I don't know how Kansas City, after winning back-to-back Super Bowls, can take these type games week in and week out without eventually running out of juice. That felt like a playoff game, didn't it? The intensity, the physicality, that was... I had, because the Arizona-LA game ended so fast. That thing was over 5 minutes into the game. The Steelers versus the Broncos on one TV and the Chiefs, it was like 2 different sports being played in those 2 games. I do think for whatever reason that graphic kind of illustrated it. Cincinnati plays this team better than anyone. They beat them in the playoffs. They went toe-to-toe with them a couple years ago. Easily could have beat them again in the playoffs. Probably, they're going to be kicking themselves. Should have won this game. I hate to see the game decided on a late penalty.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I just think at the end of the day, the Chiefs' culture completely flipped when they traded Tyreek Hill, and they have this physical kind of, they're a defensive team. Spagnuolo is just brilliant. They are going through some growing pains starting a rookie left tackle. Because so many teams now, you just watch around the NFL, even the bad teams have pass rushers, and they move them around. They're going to put them over that kid every single week. And Mahomes, luckily, he's a great scrambler. Kelsey looks his age. He's no longer, and he's kind of saving himself for the end of the season, and they did that again last year. But, God, he's no longer, I would say, the week in, week out dominant player.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote down 3 plays in this game because I started it was a close game. So I'm like, I'm going to write down the big plays in the fourth quarter. Mahomes to Kelsey, huge gainer. 3rd and 6. Trailing 25-23, Kansas City gets that Spags blitz sack. Late flag on Cincinnati. The 3 big plays to me all went in Kansas City's favor. They remind me a little bit like an old KG boxer, like Sugar Ray Leonard out of his prime. They win the end of the round. You get shots at them. You may knock them down. It's not always aesthetically pleasing, but they kind of figure out how to manipulate the judges, manipulate the game. You see this in the NBA with old teams, that they just have a way of figuring out how to play the game late. There's an art to football at the end of a game and using your timeouts and field position. The Chiefs do not give you a out of 10 performance. Boy, but in the big moments, John, that's where Kelsey's great last year in the playoffs. He was huge in the red zone, huge on third or fourth down. And I think that's what they are. They are, as they go through growing pains, they're still the great closing team in this sport.
Well, they're not as phased as much as, remember 2 years ago, Mahomes went through an awful stretch where he had a bunch of turnovers and they were playing bad. I think this was not last year, but 2 years ago. And now they still have that happen, but their defense is so good.
Yeah.
They're just such good open field tacklers. I thought also, they don't mentally crack. They ended up still kicking a field goal, but Jamar Chase freaking out about a hip drop. Bro, he grabbed you by your shoulder pads and then he lets you down. Like, relax. Yeah. And Joe Burrow has known him forever. Is like trying to come, and he won't listen to anybody. And that kind of ultimately wasn't the difference in the game, but that doesn't happen to Kansas City.
Yep.
If anything, they get the guy off the field. They're not giving up 15 free yards and let Andy or whoever yell at each other, but they're not yelling at the ref in that spot.
No,
and Jamar Chase, I mean, beside Burrow, he's one of their best players, one of the better players in the league. You cannot lose your shit like that in that spot. It's really unacceptable. Yeah. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, I felt like Cincinnati sort of lost this game. Not that Kansas City didn't make plays. They deserve it. They're impossible to me to root against because I really, again, I liked old fighters and I like teams that are great in the clutch. There's a New England quotient. Like, you feel like sometimes, do they have the best players out here today?
Don't they feel like the Patriots the way they play now, like that dynasty? They didn't early on with Tyreek. They do now.
Yeah, like the bottom line is they're more physical. They have a better coach. Their quarterback's better in crisis, and they don't beat themselves. Now, dramatically, they're much more fun to watch, I think, than New England was outside of the Randy Moss years. But it's very much best coach, best quarterback, don't beat themselves, a mother with 2 minutes to go in the game. Third downs, fourth downs, red zone. They're magic. And maybe that in the history of football has always been the case with the best team. But I thought Cincinnati, Jamar Chase losing their cool, giving up the big sack, the pass interference late. Again, KC deserved it, but Cincinnati in this spot, which Buffalo's done against this team, which Baltimore's done against this team, beat themselves.
This wouldn't be the end of the world for Cincinnati to lose at Kansas City if they hadn't just blown such an awful game. And I have strong opinions on a lot of coaches. I'm kind of indifferent on Zach Taylor. I don't know much about him. I don't hear him talk that often. I don't hear bad things about him. People like the guy. He clearly has done a pretty good job over the course of his career. But you watch this performance and you go, you should win the division. But you find yourself 0-2. They don't get up for games. They obviously get up for Kansas City. But how do I take you seriously when you lose at home to the Patriots? So they probably should win 10, 11 games if Burrow's healthy, but you put yourself behind the 8 ball, all of a sudden you might be struggling to get a wild card spot.
Well, the good news is Ravens are 0-2, and the Steelers over the course of a season, the Steelers have faced Kirk Cousins and then Bo Nix. So, Bo Nix is a kid. There's nothing.
He was bad today. He was bad. And I have money on him to win offensive rookie of the year. He was atrocious.
Okay, I want to talk Cowboys Saints. So we all know coaching matters, but holy shit. You give Derek Carr, Gary Kubiak's kid, the coach, the coordinator. First of all, the motions, the shifting. It's a totally different offense. I watched the Jets-Titans. Nat Hackett's offense. Aaron's one of the smarter guys in the league playing quarterback. Very little motion, very remedial, doesn't really challenge Aaron intellectually. Now, I think the Saints have more talent outside of quarterback. They got more players. But I'm watching the Saints offense against Dallas. And we can blame Dallas, but they are moving all over the field. Jesus. It's amazing what happens when you have a competent quarterback. I'm not asking for great. Baker, Derek, you protect him, and you have a coordinator who can change stuff up. And I'm watching the Saints today. They averaged 7.7 yards a play. They were 50% on third down. Derek Carr was only, what did I have here? 11 of 16. They never threw the football. It was all motions, and it was like, that's when I buy into a team, when it's beyond, it's not just that they're scoring. This coach, this coordinator, it's a little like Detroit last year, though they're not as good. At some point, they're just going to score points if they play inside or play in good weather. Your thoughts on that game?
Well, the MVP race right now is Derek Carr, Sam Darnold, and Baker Mayfield fighting it out. So, I'm probably dead wrong on the Broncos, but I pounded the drum leading into the start of the season on the Saints.
Yeah.
I liked them to win the division. I liked them to make the playoffs. They went 9-8 last year, and for half the season, their offense was atrocious. They have a good defense. They have really good players on defense.
Yes.
Dennis Allen, some of his stats against the spread and stuff, I get it. But defensively, everyone in the NFL sings his praises. He's good. Kubiak, the Shanahans and Kubiak might as well be one family, right?
Right.
Gary played for Mike, then Kyle worked for Gary. One of the Kubiaks now works for Kyle. They're all one in the same. That offense does two things well. Makes it easy on the quarterback.
Yes.
And features the running back. Well, no team has more invested in their running back room than the Saints. And Alvin Kamara is an excellent player.
Yes.
And he's perfect for the scheme. Why? He's a good zone runner and he's an excellent pass catcher. What does that offense like to do? Throw the ball to the running back.
It's a lot like why McCaffrey is so unbelievable with San Francisco.
They're very similar players. Christian's a little more physical, I would say, between the tackles. Yeah. But Alvin Kamara, when he's right, is a Pro Bowl level guy. And today I would imagine he's the offensive player of the week. I mean, I think he had 17 touchdowns today. But Kubiak, and you never know, because when these guys work for McVay, when they work for Sean Payton, when they work for Kyle, they don't actually call the plays. But like when you tell me his name's Kubiak, so yeah, I would imagine he's going to know the offense pretty well. He's been brilliant. I saw someone that covers the Saints today tweeted like he might get a head coaching job before the season's even over. I mean, he has been. Their defense was awesome. The Cowboys didn't have a shot today, and obviously Dak throws a couple bad picks, but that's just they ran into a buzzsaw.
Yep.
And when Derek has had no one dealt with more instability for the first 9 years of his career. The team literally moved, yet they stayed in a spot. They ran through coaches. They had the Gruden situation. Derek has seen a lot of shit. And by the end of the year last year, he looked pretty good.
He did.
And now the offense, they have good wide receivers. They have a good running game. They drafted, I think, the tackle from Oregon State who literally could play all 5 positions.
Yeah.
They're just, right now, they are, to me, the Bucs are good too. Like that division, I think most people just took a giant dump on. Like it sucks. Actually, I got 2 pretty good teams and 2 quarterbacks who, that have a lot of talent around them, can play well. But the Saints, I liked them a lot. They've been better than I thought.
Yeah, and I also think if you consider Derek Carr a B to a B plus quarterback, which I think Baker is, which I think Geno's closer to B minus. But if you look at the Saints roster between, I think Jeff Ireland and Mickey Loomis are the 2 guys running personnel. They don't miss on a lot of draft picks. John, if you start writing, I mean, DeMario Davis, one of the best linebackers in the game.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he's a thumper. They got 8 to 10 Pro Bowl level players. We just know the Niners players, right? Like they're such a national team. The Saints aren't. They're wildly popular in Louisiana, big in the South. But Breeze leaves. You know, who's Dennis Allen? They're not a big national team anymore. You watch that game against Dallas. To me, that wasn't about the Cowboys. It was about the O-line, Kamara, the play call. Again, Derek Carr was 6 of 13 on third downs. He didn't throw the ball. They didn't ask him to do anything. It's very Brock Purdy. It's a really easy lift when you're throwing on 2nd and 4 and 3rd and 1.
The other thing is they have some more similarities than people would realize with the Steelers over the last couple of years. Quarterback play has been really atrocious.
Yeah.
If you get good quarterback play and you have a good defense and you have some skill guys, like you're going to be pretty good. And like the other thing they have going for them is they get 2 cupcake games against the Panthers. Those are 2 wins. They're going to be confident playing Atlanta and Tampa just because they play them all the time. I feel even stronger. Like I'm not saying this is a Super Bowl team, but like if Derek stays healthy, that team can't win 12 games. I mean, they got high-end players at a lot of key positions. That was today, because you never know when you beat the crap out of an awful team. And I liked them today. I liked them a lot, +6. I thought that number was a pretty crazy. They came out today like they were going to the Super Bowl, did they not? Like that thing was over quick.
I'll tell you, the wise guys love Dallas. Dallas in the regular season is an unbelievable home favorite. They are very much Tyson in his prime. They can lose to somebody. They can lose to a Holyfield or a Lennox.
Yeah.
But you put them as a favorite, they knock you out. Like Dallas is a great home team against usually. I mean, the Saints don't beat good teams the last 3 years. They crushed Dallas.
I mean, I think Kubiak has thrown his hat into the ring really, really quick as a guy that's obviously now on everyone's radar. The one thing is when you play Zimmer, he's going to blitz a lot. And it
Yes.
happened to Kyle today with Flores, who's very similar. If you call the right play on the blitz, you're going to get a huge explosive play. And that happened over and over early in that game, and then it snowballed. We're on the opposite side with the 49ers. He was hitting the blitz, but they were getting home and sacking the quarterback, and they didn't hit the play. But Kubiak, I mean, we're only 2 weeks in, but he's an early front runner for assistant of the year right now. That's for damn sure.
Let's talk Niners. You know them well. My favorite bet of the week was Minnesota at home getting points. I think Kevin O'Connell is, I said this last week, he's Kevin Stefanski before everybody realized how good Stefanski was dealing with all that Cleveland nonsense, and he just continues to put out good game plans. Again, they didn't ask a ton of Darnold. 17 of 26, 270 yards. He had 5 rushes. Fred Warner made a great play because he's Fred Warner on an interception. Like, that's not a great interception, but again, Fred, that wouldn't have been picked off by 95% of the linebackers in the league.
Might be the only guy.
But it was a great play. But what I looked at was the time of possession, 35 minutes to 25. Minnesota controlled the football. I mean, it could have been out. If you take away the fumble by Minnesota and the great Fred Warner pick, John, this could have been a blowout. It could have been a bloodbath.
The Niners got worked. I mean, they got killed. That was, and he has 1 or 2 of these a year. I mean, it was a rough day for Kyle. Special teams, they had a punt blocked.
Yep.
Flores was taking him to the woodshed, getting free guys all over Purdy. Purdy had a bad pick, could have probably thrown another one.
Yeah.
Defensively, they had some errors, but the story of the game and one of the stories of the early year, Sam Darnold. I mean, that throw he made, the touchdown.
Oh, Jesus.
Justin Jefferson. I mean, is 70 yards in the air. I mean, you see the arm strength, but the accuracy. And you think back to the Fred Warner play. I think those are the plays early on in his career where he just kind of melts.
Yes.
And to me, whatever happened last year with Kyle, and they talked about it with Purdy, the maturation of just learning how to study, he just kind of feels like a different guy. And I think we have an example with Baker Mayfield. Some people mature at slower rates, whether it be football-wise or personally, and physically his talent. Obviously, the touchdown to Jefferson is going to be all over social media. He made some other throws on third down that were just like, I mean, he was slicing it out. He was the better quarterback on the field today. He was awesome. And then there was another play, his second touchdown, while it was wide open. Those are plays maybe early on in his career. Maybe he airmails, maybe he freaks out. Like, he just feels very, very under control. And I didn't think the Vikings were going to be very good, even though I thought it would probably go pretty well for him. You start 2-0, all of a sudden, there's a path for you to get to 9-10 wins. I mean, and that home field advantage, right? You'd have to say that Minnesota has one of the better ones in the league. And that's, like you said, that wasn't just a win. You're playing the Niners, who's coming off a short week. That was an ass kicking.
Ass kicking. I mean, if you don't get that fumble, and again, I mean, Fred Warner made a great pick, and a big hit causes a fumble, but this could have been a 3-touchdown blowout.
The score does not reflect the game
at all. I mean, the time of possession is insane. And I also think it's funny with Darnold. You mentioned he's under control. What's interesting when I watch Sam, it feels like he sped his delivery up, yet he's more under control, if that makes any sense. So his feet aren't nervous. His body's great, but it feels like O'Connell, who was a quarterback in the league, the knock on him. What Steve Keim told me on Friday on FS1, I said, "Did you like Darnold coming out?" And he goes, I didn't really like him. I didn't like his mechanics. He was too slow. Totally fair criticism. And Sam's a playmaker like Mahomes. He's going to throw bad picks. All these guys that run around throw bad picks. I mean, Jesus, Mahomes has 2 or 3 terrible picks this year. I can live with that. But Sam also 5-6 different times takes off. And what Sam's also done, I think he sped his delivery up a little bit. His feet are under control. But I think O'Connell gives him, and I've heard guys talk about this, Matt Hasselbeck talks about this. Sam looks like O'Connell gives him clear things, like he drops and he immediately is staring down a second later, staring down at a play. His head's not moving all over the place. I feel like he's really intentional. I guess that's the way to say it. Like, I don't feel like he's out of control. Even if he moves in the pocket, he feels in control.
Yeah, they mentioned this on the broadcast. He must have said to them that one thing he did last year and he's carried into this year is tying his feet with his upper body because clearly that was really out of whack. And that's where you get throwing, you get to throw a lot of picks. Like it's one thing Mahomes is brilliant at, despite him kind of moving all over the place. He can always set himself when he needs to make a throw. That's why he's pretty accurate going to his left, going to his right. And like you said, Sam is a playmaker because he has a massive arm. But if you can, one problem was early in his career, he couldn't hit layups.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure we'll talk about Anthony Richardson. If you can't do the basic stuff, you have no chance because you're only going to hit the occasional sweet 60-yard bomb. Right. You have to hit 2nd and 7, the out route, hit the guy in stride to move the chains. And that's what Sam did all day today. And he did last week against the Giants. I mean, he looks like a really solid player who's going to start in this league for a while. I had the thought today, like, if he's going to play like this all year, I know you just invested in a player, but you just let this guy walk if he's going to play at this level. It's one thing to do it against the Giants. It's another thing to light up the 49ers like a Christmas tree. And so if he does this as the season goes on to the Lions, the Packers, I do. It's not just like you just let him walk. I mean, that's not usually the way the NFL works. You kind of deal with what you got and you just kind of ride it and figure it out later.
Now for a segment called Making It Look Easy, brought to you by Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Today, Sam Darnold made it look easy, 268 yards, 2 TDs, ran around in a win against his former team, the Niners. Just like Sam made it look easy, Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to submit a claim. They have over 100 offices nationwide, more than 800 lawyers, with over $15 billion recovered from over 300,000 clients. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. If you're ever injured, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial pound 529 to check out America's largest injury law firm. Winning in the NFL is hard, but hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Yeah, it's interesting for the Niners, too, because the Rams got dusted. Good coaches and quarterbacks who get humiliated almost always play well the following week, and the Rams get their left tackle back, which is a huge problem. And I don't know Bosa's situation physically. Now, McCaffrey's...
He was fine. I think he's okay.
Okay, he'll be fine. So it'll probably be a Niners win. But, the scheduling, we don't... you and I take scheduling very seriously.
Yeah.
You looked at Minnesota's schedule in the first 6 weeks. You're like, oh my God, they could go 0-6. Now you're 2-0. Shit, if you go 3-3, the back and the middle of that schedule for Minnesota, Detroit doesn't look nearly as good. Chicago, we don't know what we're getting. I want to talk Detroit, Tampa. So, there's the old saying in almost every industry, strike when the iron's hot. So Ben Johnson, Lions OC, is the hottest guy in the league. I've watched them back-to-back weeks. Second half last week, they weren't very good. Against Tampa, Jared Goff threw 55 times, and Tampa had injuries in the back end of their defense. I'm watching them, and I'm like, Detroit had an edge in first downs and time of possession, and yet something's missing. Like, Goff should not be throwing 55 times a game with an average secondary. That was my take on it.
To me, one thing that stood out in that game, when you watch the two quarterbacks, Baker's not Lamar Jackson, but he can move. Goff cannot.
Yeah.
So when you start hitting Goff, it really rattles him and throws him off. And that happened today. And balls were flying all over the place. Threw a couple awful picks over the middle of the field.
Yep.
He can't ad-lib. Like one thing Darnold, like watching Darnold and Purdy, like those guys can move and keep and play alive. Jared Goff cannot.
Yeah.
So if it is not there and it's not there fast, the other thing is I got to give this guy credit. Now he had a good year last year, won a playoff game, and now he's having a good start. Todd Bowles is an excellent defensive coordinator. I mean, excellent. So when you look at that game, you just go Todd Bowles, who's just as a defensive coordinator, non-head coach, he might be the best in the league against Ben Johnson. I think the thing with Ben Johnson, big picture, he turned a lot of people off last year.
Yes.
In the word out, the way he handled things. Listen, if you don't want to leave, you don't want to leave, but he calls them as they're flying to him. It's been bizarre the way that's happened. I still think their talent on offense is so immense that it's going to be hard for that over the course of the season because Jamison Williams had a big play today. You add that to go. St. Brown gets banged up a lot. You watch the Lions, and there's a lot of times where he's coming up, and you're like, he hurt his knee, he hurt his hip, but they got two good running backs. Their offensive line, they should not be struggling to score points. But credit to Tampa. Like I watch Tampa and go, well, Baker's playing well, and Godwin and Evans are as good of a 1-2 combination. I mean, you got one guy's going to the Hall of Fame, and Godwin, ask Tom Brady about him. He loves the freaking guy. They look good, Colin.
The other thing, the Goff lack of mobility, and I like Jared a lot.
Same.
But if you go to the big games in this league, that mobility thing is why Mahomes is hoisting trophies. He had a 45-yard run in last year's Super Bowl. If you look at Jalen Hurts, Allen, Mahomes, the mobility thing's not a small thing. Now, Kyler was off the freaking rails today.
Oh,
Jesus. Yeah. It's just insane.
Best game of his life, I think.
Yeah. But the Goff thing isn't a small thing. Is that when you get into the second half, so the first half.
Cousins is the same, right? They can't move. They're sitting ducks.
So you get into these situations, your first half is largely, the first couple drives are on script, maybe your third even a bit. Second half is not. It's not just a little thing to say Goff is incapable of moving, because this staff's best coaches are on offense. It's not like Belichick, where Belichick was literally just giving Tom field position, turnovers, and 6. Yeah. So Detroit's going to score their way to championships. They're going to be in these shootouts. Well, you're not going to throw for 4 touchdowns in big games. So one of the things that I took away, I wrote in my notes today, Aaron Rodgers is no longer mobile. It completely reduces the Jets' offense, which we'll get to next. But Goff's inability to move, I also wrote this down. Baker now, I don't know if he lost a little weight. I know Lamar lost weight.
He did. I think he did last year. He talked about it.
Yeah, I think Baker's moving better than he's ever moved in his career.
Dramatically. I think, just thinking about Goff, that game that we just witnessed, Cincy and Kansas City, how often those two guys had to scramble to keep plays alive.
Absolutely.
And Mahomes probably a little bit better athlete than Joe, but Joe can move fine. Yep. Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins fall under this category of, they're not like the elite old school pocket quarterbacks, but when they are, they do have time, they can look really good, but it does have to be perfect. And every defensive coordinator hit the guy early and it throws him off. And Goff got hit early and he just skipping balls. He was just off, and he cannot be, he physically is incapable at the NFL level to move around and keep a play alive. Because once the play doesn't hit right away, they either block for an extra couple seconds or they're just screwed. And Cousins falls under the same category. Those players don't really exist anymore, Colin. All the good quarterbacks, they all can move. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Mahomes, Burrow, Purdy, Jalen Hurts. Mobility is a big part of them, because half these plays, these defenders, I mean, not a millionaires on that side. Defensive coordinators making a lot. You have to be able to keep plays alive. He just cannot. Now, I like him better than Cousins, and I like his team better. Yeah. But you saw today, like, that's like the reason maybe the Lions can't win a Super Bowl is like, you face enough good defenses, you're going to be in trouble, because he gets thrown off. He looks like a different player than when he's really humming.
I want to talk Jets, Tennessee. So the notes I wrote down, I remember hearing years ago that Aaron Rodgers didn't love a lot of motion. He didn't like you screwing around. Aaron liked to go to the line, do motion. Don't try to trick people. Just let me see the defense and where I can go. And I've heard that on more than one occasion with Aaron. He wasn't a huge fan of all the movement, the jumbo sets, the trickery. Just let me get to the line. Let me look around. Let me see the guys that I can attack. But that doesn't mean you're not going to have some. I mean, you will watch the Saints and the Niners, Kevin O'Connell's teams. They're really smart teams. Mike McDaniel, they're moving constantly. The motion percentages are through the roof. The Jets offense, they get plays in late. There's very little motion. It doesn't challenge Aaron at all. Now, Breece Hall made a hell of a catch in the end zone. But think about this. With Will Levis, who may have the worst judgment of any quarterback I've ever seen, the Titans had more yards, more passing yards, more first downs, and fewer punts than the Jets. Now, timeout. We're talking Aaron's a top 10 quarterback. Will Levis may be the worst. How is that possible? And my takeaway is, because I think the better coaching on the offensive side is the Callahans. But I'm watching the Jets, and they won, and I thought they'd win more comfortably. But God, John, I mean, you were a scout in this league. The Jets offense is just put it in Aaron's hands, try to get it to Garrett or Brees. It doesn't fool anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I text you after last week, and everyone's like, can't overreact. They're playing the Niners. Well, we hadn't seen Aaron Rodgers because we didn't see him in the preseason. You talk about movement. He's Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins with a much better arm. And a huge part of his brilliance over his career was he's probably the greatest behind the line of scrimmage scramble thrower in the history of the league. And that is done.
Yeah.
So he's Jared Goff with a stronger arm now, but he doesn't have a great offensive coordinator.
No.
And their personnel, they have one wide receiver. So what happened today? Well, the Titans traded and paid Snead a lot of money, neutralized Garrett Wilson a little bit. Now, they got two players on offense, a running back and a wide receiver. This is not like they don't have a sweet tight end. They don't have a deep wide receiver room. How many guys did they lose today on defense? Jermaine Johnson, a pass rusher, got carted off the field.
Yeah.
Mosley got hurt. He didn't come back. Hassan Reddick has already given up one of the worst business decisions in the history of the world. $8 million just hasn't shown up. So, like, Saleh can say all he wants, out of sight, out of mind. You're missing that player. Yeah. So their defense isn't nearly as good as it has been the last couple of years. And then you factor in, Rodgers is an upgrade over their quarterback play. Zach Wilson, whoever the hell they've been rolling out for the last 2 years. But relative to what they traded for, he's, to me, a shell of himself.
Yep.
This notion that, like, he still throws a great ball. If me and you took Dan Marino out to a high school field right now, Dan Marino would throw a beautiful spiral. Right. Aaron Rodgers is going to throw a beautiful spiral into his 70s.
Yeah.
What made him an elite player or a high-end player was the athleticism combined with the accuracy and the arm strength.
Yeah.
The athleticism, now his movement, he feels like more rigid, doesn't he? Just looking at him. And he knows it. He knows he can't run. He's not trying to run. He looks like a different player. Still, relative for them, upgrade.
Yeah.
But I don't view the Jets as a playoff team at all, Colin. I mean, I think things have to go so perfectly. They've already got injuries with guys that haven't even been injured before. Well, so what happens when their injured guys get injured?
I said this before the season. I said, folks, if Breece Hall twists an ankle, just roll your coverage over to Garrett Wilson. Aaron doesn't move. He's now 10-11 in his last 21 games. And that game was more about Will Levis. I mean, again, Titans had more passing yards, more first downs, fewer punts. That is the worst quarterback in the league.
He's given away literally 2 games in a row.
No question.
I mean, 2 games. Their defense, I would say the Titans' defense, just watching football these last couple of weeks, has been one of the better units. They have been fantastic. And Will Levis, you were on this a long time ago. Other people have jumped on the bandwagon. I think everyone, you're not going to find a supporter, probably including his coach today. He was screaming at him when he had that turnover. Just, it's unheard of. I mean, it's like high school level turnovers.
Yeah, you know what it is? So I called somebody in the NFL. It was a coach who's since been let go. And somebody I've been friends with for 5 or 6 years. And I called him and I said, or I texted him, I said, hey, can we, I got some questions about a couple guys. And so we talked. And he knows I love football, and he asked me about a couple guys, and he asked me about Will Levis, and I said, it really worries me. I just see narcissism. I see kind of a guy, the gun show at the combine. And both those last 2 games, and I'll kind of wedge this in, he's made mistakes that a selfish player would make. He has made egregiously bad plays with certain different times, not just those 2, but he's made several plays where it's like, dude, protect your team in this spot. The Chicago pick is egregious. Protect your team. Will's into Will. Will loves his arm. Will love the way he looked, the headband. He's cool. I get it. Confidence matters. But there are times in this league, game managing, Tom Brady managed a lot of leads. He managed a lot of moments. Will gets into these and it's like, I'm going to make a play. It's like, bro, you're tied 4th quarter with Aaron Rodgers. This is a winnable game now. And I just, over the course of a game, he really reminds me of Jay Cutler. And Jay Cutler was a guy that was never liked in the room. Aaron Rodgers, we can criticize him. People in the room like Aaron. People out may not. I think Will Levis could lose a locker room really fast.
Yeah, I don't even know who their backup is, but I mean, to me, you could bench him immediately. I mean, and I hear the Jay Cutler, just kind of the reckless nature. Jay Cutler was in a different universe as a player than Will. I mean, Will Levis is just not an NFL starter. Uh, the, highlight plays, and this is what Bill harped on about Caleb in the preseason, are meaningless, whether it's the preseason or a regular season game, if you can't do normal stuff well. And then in the big spots, like the Joe Burrow fumble, like to me, I don't really hold that against him. Kind of freakish play. You have confidence that he can manage a game. That's why he's such a great player. Where Will Levis now back-to-back games, coming off a moment where you just did something that was the just everyone was making fun of you around the league. You think you would kind of overcompensate and really just, hey, take a sack if I have to. And he did the opposite. And then his coach freaked out in another winnable game. I mean, the Jets were, like you said, all the stats, they were against the ropes. They did not look good. No. I mean, they were losing players. I'm thinking this is going to be really, really bad because the Patriots have been kind of feisty. It's like they wouldn't be some lock to win on Thursday night. And then you find a way to win. You get a little momentum. You beat the Patriots. All of a sudden, you feel kind of good about yourself. But I have come away these 2 weeks being very, very concerned. Jets defense is worse than we had thought.
Yep. And
Rodgers, who we just were, I was only going off like NFL Network highlights, thinking like, God, Rodgers is kind of limping around. And you watch him move. He's very ginger.
Yeah.
And he does not want to leave the little radius where, wouldn't you say,
4 feet. 4 feet radius.
We've all been watching the guy for 15 years. No one was quicker. Take off, set his feet, and throw a strike. Those days are gone.
It's time for this week's player I thought might give you almost anything to redo his game, brought to you by Uber Eats. This week, it's Will Levis again, who had an even uglier turnover than last week. 5 turnovers for Will Levis already through 2 games. The Titans are 0-2. That was this week's Uber Eats Player of the Week. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Uber Eats. Order now. Yeah, I want to talk about Chargers-Panthers. First of all, Bryce Young has an offensive coach and better weapons. He may not be able to play. 1 for 12 on third down, 69 passing yards. He moves well. He doesn't throw well. But here's what was a big moment in this game. So the Chargers were favored by about 6. They blew them out. So once again, it is exactly what we expected. Justin Herbert goes 14-20, has about a half dozen rushes. So, they get Joe Alt. Now they have elite tackle play, elite edge rusher play. And we worried about they don't have a number 1. Well, Quentin Johnson today had 5 catches and 2 touchdowns. So Quentin's the guy they got out of TCU. Brandon Staley didn't know how to develop him. He was a disaster last year. I'm not sure if
lost his confidence. They had thrown him to the side. Yeah.
I mean, he was they didn't even target him last year. He made a heck of a catch today for a touchdown. If he hits, so now you got the slot kid out of Georgia. J.K. Dobbins is like did you see that flip into the end zone? Like he's a different.
Looks like a top 5 or 6 running back in the NFL right now.
Okay, so now I've got a top 10 quarterback. I've got a top 5 coach. J.K. Dobbins, I have a run game, elite tackles, elite edge rushers. If Quentin Johnson, along with their slot guy out of Georgia, okay, now you do have a weapon because he was a big kid, but he reminded me last year a little bit of Stephen Hill, the bust for the Jets years ago, the wide receiver, the guy that just could run fast, look great in the hotel lobby, but you're like, what is it? Not today. I thought it's amazing, John. Their time of possession advantage was 36-23. It's so hardball. It's so Michigan. But I thought to myself, you know what? I'm looking around at these teams. This team could be a 12-win team, John. Elite tackles, elite quarterback, elite coach, elite edge rushers, now a star back, time of possession dominance. Now we know the Raiders are better than we thought.
Yeah, I was kicking myself because that game was over fast. That I get Jim Harbaugh against this Panthers situation and didn't bet the mortgage. Like, what was I doing? Jim, and we've been talking about this. I was in the car this week when he came on with you. His personality is dramatically different than the guy I remember when I was around in San Francisco, who had this huge chip on his shoulder and was tight. It felt like the way the last couple of years in Michigan, proving like, hey guys, I'm one of the best in the business. I don't know if it's been the weight's been lifted off his shoulders.
Yeah.
But I know this, and I Jim might have said this to you, or I heard him say this somewhere, is that his dad was at a training camp practice and looked at him and said, I think JK looks like the guy that a couple years ago before he got injured. if you give Jim Harbaugh a top end running back, because we know he's always going to have a good offensive line. That's why everyone thought he was nuts. Like, he's going to take a wide receiver. Like, no, guys, he's going to take a offensive lineman, and then he calls them skill positions. Their defense is always going to be solid. Why? One, he's just an elite hirer. Like, he hires well.
Yeah.
So, like, and John does too. They hire good defensive coaches. So their defense is going to be well coached, even if they're going to be better personnel wise in a couple years. But like, what he does translates. He controls the line of scrimmage on offense, which even if you have a way better offense than him, he keeps you off the field. And that wasn't the case today, but he can just run it down your throat. So if he can run it down your throat, Jim Harbaugh is a lock to win double-digit games in college or the pros.
Yeah.
And clearly the Broncos are not going to be very good. I still think one advantage the Raiders had, the Ravens' offensive line is not good, and the Raiders do have a good defensive line.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were down 10 in the fourth quarter and came storming, but it was an impressive win on the road.
It was.
But to me, the Ravens, I got red flagged. I mean, they got some weird stuff going on. But I think Jim Harbaugh can finish second in this division with 10 or 11 wins and be in the playoffs. I don't think he can beat the Chiefs. Their team is not good enough. Maybe in an individual game, like 1 out of 2, but
they are built to beat Kansas City.
Well, they're built to play in an ugly, 23-20
That's
game.
right. Yeah, their time of possessions so far this season are really impressive. And it's just it's funny because just think about this. 6 months ago, before the college football playoff, 70% of fans and media were still doubting Jim Harbaugh. He was getting crushed. He couldn't coach in the Penn State game. He's overrated. And now you look at him and you're like, stop, media. Stop. This guy is absolutely phenomenal. This team almost reminds me.
Well, he's not even hateable anymore. The way he carries himself, the way he interacts. He's actually much more lovable now, because he used to have like this aggressive. He was tough on the press, definitely publicly. He could befriend him off. This version of Jim Harbaugh, and I didn't follow him as closely like at Michigan. And part of it, he was suspended a couple times last year, just in terms of his daily press conferences. He's a new man. I mean, I bet the Spanishes are like, God, this is incredible, the way he interacts, how happy he is. I mean, he feels like a different person. Maybe he's 60 now. Life's good. I don't know. Southern California, he feels completely different than the guy at Stanford, at the 49ers, and I would say early on at Michigan. Just his mannerisms, his communication, his everyday demeanor.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is he's inherited some decent quarterbacks. Alex Smith, I think he realizes, holy crap, I got a top 5 quarterback here. That makes everybody happier. And Tom Telesco deserves some credit. They've got players. I mean, Tom made a mistake. He hired the wrong guy. Brian Daboll was out there. He knew Daboll, but they ended up going with Brandon Staley. If he has Daboll, maybe Jim Harbaugh stays in college. It's weird how things work. If the doctor for the Miami Dolphins gives Drew Brees the thumbs up, Nick may never go to Alabama. He stays. He was starting to kind of get things going in Miami. Well, I mean, the bottom line, if Daboll gets the job and not Brandon Staley, my take is Justin Herbert's good, and Harbaugh's probably staying at college one more year. But it is interesting to watch them. This team reminds me a little of the Stanford team, which if you go back to the early years, once they got Andrew Luck, you had this great quarterback, and he only threw like 25 times a game. They were pounding
down your throat.
Running down your throat. They had good tackles. They had a pass rush. So I think it's interesting. Tutty, taking it to the house, in for 6, whatever you call a touchdown. One thing's for sure, TDs matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, special teams or defense, they don't care how you score them. They want to bet on touchdowns. You want to bet on touchdowns. DraftKings Sportsbook, #1 place to bet on TDs. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Bet on something simple, like a player scoring a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app. Make your bet today. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets instantly and 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. The code's Colin. Again, the code, new customers bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets and 1 month of NFL Plus Premium only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. I want to talk Rams, Arizona. Listen, Rams don't have any players. I mean, they're just Cooper Kupp was limping today. Puka is already out. Tyler Higsby's out. Let's talk Marvin Harrison and Kyler. So Marvin Harrison, the best college receiver I ever saw was Randy Moss. The second was Calvin Johnson. I think Marvin reminds me a little of Calvin Johnson. Size, length, catching radius, hands. He doesn't run like Moss, either did Calvin, but you're not going to catch him from behind. But now, the first week, Steve Keim told me he'd watched the film and the tape, and he said Marvin was nervous. He was playing slow. He's not really a burner. But in a league, you saw it today with the Rams, in a league that has a lack of corners, and with Kyler's ability to run, you have to have a spy. He's going to get some one-on-one, and they run the football well. So it's like you start looking at Arizona, and you're like, we watched Buffalo handle Miami. Buffalo's probably a pretty good team. They took a big lead on them. Harrison is, all of a sudden they have two backs. Kyler had his best game maybe as a pro, Marvin Harrison. And I will argue this. I think their coach is good on his side of the ball. I think they play their ass off defensively. What do you make of Arizona and Kyler?
I don't know where Kyler ranks, 1 through 12 or whatever. He's probably closer 10 through 12 than he is 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But when he's on, there's a short list of players that you would rather watch. He is as entertaining as they get. Like what Deshaun Watson has become, like no one wants to watch him. Kyler's the opposite. It was like, this is awesome. He's always going to have some limitations in the pocket just because of height, but just a pure talent. You've been watching sports longer than me. He has to be one of the great, true blue chip just talents in the history of sports. To have that much capability to do the things he can do at 5'9". His speed, his arm strength, his accuracy on the move. Obviously, Harrison's a really good player. The one thing I heard in the offseason when he got drafted is the one transition part for Marvin Harrison was going to be the overwhelming majority of players he saw in college these last couple of years were guys, not NFL corners, or a lot of guys in the Big Ten. And he came to the NFL, and he's immediately facing the first week, the Bills, Rasul Douglas. This guy's making $10 million a year. Probably has a couple kids at home, drives a Range Rover, lives in a mansion, and he's trying to take your lunch.
Yeah.
And Marvin, it was going to be a wake-up moment. And today, they don't exactly have Jalen Ramsey out there anymore. So you get a confidence. He gets an early catch. I loved, from a gambling perspective, betting on Marvin Harrison, whatever his props were, because last week it was such a big story. You knew they were going to try to feed him the ball, right, to get his confidence moving. They have a lot of talent. Like if Kyler's he doesn't need to play like today, but if he's playing well, Trey McBride, if you just did a draft from scratch with GMs, would be a top 5 tight end.
Yep.
James Conner is a running back no one talks about. Whenever I watch him, even last year, like, God, this guy could play on my team any day of the week.
Yes.
And like you said, my buddies with Philly, I know the way it ended, right? Defensively, he got a lot of shit, Gannon. They love the guy. And I remember hearing like he might be a better head coach than he was a pure schematics guy because how good he is with players, how good of a leader he is,
right?
The way he carries himself. He's a really smart guy. I don't know if they're a playoff team because the one thing with Kyler is he can be a very up and down. He's like a streaky shooter in the NBA.
He's also
like,
small, get banged up.
Exactly. Like he could score 30 and the next game he scores 5 points.
But
when he's healthy, he's on a top 5 list of guys that would keep defensive coordinators up throughout the week because he can do stuff like that.
And like Minnesota, we may not love their overall roster, but you look at Minnesota's offensive pieces and they don't even have Jordan Addison yet. It's like Minnesota's got left tackle, back, tight end, 2 receivers, quarterback, coach. Like they got dogs. Arizona, McBride, the 2 backs, Marvin Harrison. They had another kid make a nice catch in the back of the end zone. It's like Kyler, I just watched them today, and I'm like, the 2 teams in the league that I've watched, and I've went, wow, Saints, and even though they're 1-1, Arizona, that first half against Buffalo was on the ropes.
The one thing Kyler, and if you remember back, was it 3 or 4 years ago when they started like 11-1? He wears down over the course of the year as guys do get shots on him. When he is healthy, and clearly he is right now, he can be like an MVP candidate. Can he look like that? And one thing that's very clear in the Tua hit, which was awful to watch, was avoidable. You got to slide. Jaden Daniels, another guy, incredible runner, cannot slide.
Yeah.
the smart quarterbacks, like I thought the moment that Tua moment happened, I was like, I bet every quarterback beside like Jared Goff, because you don't even need to show him this, and Kirk Cousins is going to watch that like 10 times with their quarterback coach. Like, you guys are too important to us to not slide. Yes, this is not the 1980s and 70s, but you will still get injured if you run into these defenders. And if Kyler, who is a baseball player, is a good slider and is so fast, can get to the edges and get out of bounds, can avoid just the meaningless hits. You don't need Jaden Daniels is taking, like, he is such a special talent, but he's taking so many meaningless hits that just wears you over the course of the year. And eventually, if a guy holds you up and another guy's coming in, it could end your season. I'm talking breaking a clavicle, breaking an arm. And I do think Kyler's now been around a long time and he has the capability to slide. He just, every time he runs, should never get tackled, right? And if I was them, I would never call like a Josh Allen power run between the tackles. Any run beside when he's scrambling around is an edge run. But how do you not call some for him? Because he is that today. This is where you get, if you're the Rams and the Bengals, when you lose, like the Rams lost a coin flip game week 1, then all of a sudden it snowballs. Now they're getting the Niners, who are also going to be pissed off, who kind of owned you. All of a sudden you look, we're 0-3 and we think we're pretty good. You know, and that can happen. The Bengals, same thing. All of a sudden it's like, oh, it's why you got to take advantage when you have those coin flip games.
I will say this: San Francisco lost, Baltimore Rams 0-2. It is a long season. I will
Bengals
say
0-2.
this. Yeah, I'm going to circle back though. Of all those teams, big picture. Let's wrap it up with this big picture. Of all the teams that are scrapping, I like Cincinnati. First of all, T. Higgins is coming back. They just lost a game they could have won against Kansas City. That's a pretty damn good loss. Joe Burrow's fantastic. Burton will become more of a player. You know, he's just a young receiver. You got guys like him over a 4 or 5 game stretch can become a different player. I think Baltimore's O-line's a mess. I think the Rams' O-line's a mess. Those are real concerns. I look at Cincinnati, John, if they reeled off 8 straight wins, I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, they beat every team in the league beside the Chiefs today, right? Yep. I mean, so that version of the game is a 12-13 win team. So I'm with you. I just, the Burrow injury is always in the back of your head. Can he stay healthy? They do, Jamar Chase, you have to wonder if his outbursts is a lot going on with his contract. Now he says, I'm good for the season. They just got a lot going on.
Yes.
T. Higgins is having to answer questions like, is he faking an injury because he's pissed off at the contract? This is a spot that if you told me like Tomlin, John Harbaugh or Jim Harbaugh was handling the guys, like he could handle it. You see Zach trying to get Jamar Chase, younger guy, even though he's now been a head coach for a while. It's a tough position. It's not easy. But I'm with you. I mean, they're just, when Joe's right, they're really good. The one team that I'm concerned of that I liked as a playoff team was our guy Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen in Indy. Their quarterback to lose. I loved the Colts because I was like, Malik Willis. And then Malik Willis looked better than Anthony Richardson, Bo Nix or the rookie quarterback, and he was bad. Anthony Richardson, what was that?
Well, and it concerns you because Steichen had Herbert as a rookie. Herbert set NFL rookie records. He made Jalen Hurts an MVP level player. This is the best offense. He made Gardner Minshew last year. I mean, Minshew had those guys on the doorstep. This Richardson thing, it's like he may be a remarkable player, but staffs matter. I mean, Malik Willis in the first half with LaFleur and that culture looked better than he ever did in Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee gave up on that guy after about 2 games.
Yeah.
He looked like,
he looked good. I gave guy credit. He was good.
So now Shane Steichen's had an entire offseason with Anthony Richardson. That was a mess. He looked lost.
I do think what's scary is I think if you look at every, at the highest level of sports, right? Just because you throw 102 miles an hour, you could have the best pitching coach. He might not teach you how to throw strikes.
Right.
You could be, the most talented guy in the NBA, and you could get Chip England, the shooting coach, and he just can't help you out to make, open shots. I do think in football, for every Josh Allen and guys that are able to improve their accuracy, historically speaking, there are way more examples of guys that are just all over the map. And right now, whether it's like we talked about Sam Darnold, it was way too sped up early on in his career, had to you watch him, he is kind of set at times, and the ball just flies. I mean, like he
Yes.
has no, he has no clue where it's going. You're like, oh, I don't know what you can do as a coach to fix that level of misses.
Well, think about this. Malik Willis as a spot starter, they had a 40-minute to 19-minute time of possession advantage. With Shane Steichen, I mean,
well, because when you're that inaccurate, you're gonna give up plays. You're not gonna roll any time.
okay, so just look at the accuracy of Herbert as a rookie and Hurts as a young player. And we don't think the Packers defense is great. Shit, Philadelphia ran up and down.
Oh, they look terrible.
Looked terrible. He threw the ball 34 times. He completed 50%. He had 3 picks, and he looked lost. So this is one of those things where Steichen has made he's taken every quarterback he's had, and now I think Herbert will become what he was with him. He's made everybody better. He had an off season. Like, I watched that today, and I'm like, Malik Willis is better than Anthony Richardson. At least,
Yeah,
yeah.
in all interceptions, like you were saying earlier, are not the same. Like Dak and Goff threw someone, bad games, off, over the middle of the field. Like, it's going to happen. Those guys, whatever. I still have faith in them over the course of the year. This is a guy that, if you're like, hey, you can jump off the bandwagon right now, I think you'd have to lean that way. I guess it's possible to correct it. It feels like it would have to be a pretty hard correction on this player. Because the other thing is Jalen, people question like his arm strength and
Right.
his path, but he did have, like, this guy played for Saban, then he went to Lincoln Riley.
That's right.
Gardner Minshew had already been a starter in the NFL. This guy has a very limited track record in college and the pros, and accuracy was a huge question mark. And the other thing you see is Jalen does have touch, like he's a great deep ball thrower down the sideline. This guy has no changeup. Everything is going at warp speed. And when everything's going at warp speed, it is very difficult to be considered an accurate quarterback. And the other thing is balls fly off guys' hands, go up in the air, and usually a safety is behind your offensive player. It's going to lead to a lot of, this guy could easily lead the league in interceptions this season. I would say he's the betting favorite.
Well, and as we talk Green Bay Colts, I think the one thing that I've really noticed is, you always have to be careful. The grass is always greener. And, Aaron's seeing it now. You go from Matt LaFleur to Nat Hackett. You go from the Packers always have a stable offensive line to the Jets kind of makeshift. You go from no owner, stability Mark Murphy, to the Jets' impulsive ownership. I think Matt LaFleur got a little lost because, McCarthy won a Super Bowl and then he takes over and he had some playoff struggles. And we always lump those on Matt LaFleur. That's why you're losing in the playoffs, Matt LaFleur. I got to tell you, I'm watching Jordan Love at the end of last year, and I'm watching Malik Willis today. And those guys are both talented. But even Jordan Love last year to start the season, John, was raw. Like, he looked like he just wasn't quite. Jordan Love went from, really bad to like an MVP over the course of a season. Like, you don't get an off season. You're in the middle of it. Malik Willis today, and maybe I'm making too much. That'll be the only game he starts. But I was like, shit, he's totally under control.
The other thing is, this is not a player that was with them in OTAs and training camp. They traded for him at the end of the 53-man cutdown.
That's right.
You could argue through 2 weeks, the most impressive win of the season is Matt LaFleur winning a game with Malik Willis. That's an incredible accomplishment.
Incredible. And I think because they struggled last couple of years with Aaron in the playoffs, I think he took the hit on that. Yeah. But I always feel with Aaron, and this is not disrespectful to Aaron, but Aaron was going to blow him off on certain play. Aaron's going to do what Aaron wants to do. So it was a 50-50 offense. Aaron's coachable, but he was going to do what he wanted to do.
Matt wanted him to play under center in the Shanahan offense to give him a lot of layups. And Aaron fought against it because he loved being in the shotgun, like you said, and seeing everything. And they kind of met in the middle. And what happened? He started to win MVPs. Matt Ryan pushed against it early on because you turn your back. Once you get comfortable, it's shooting fish in a barrel for those type guys. But Aaron loved doing his thing in the shotgun. And now he can just run his offense. But today, to corral Malik Willis with probably less than 10 to 12 plays. It's just, I don't care how bad the Colts are on defense. What a win for the Packers.
I know. Huge win. I almost look at that Brazil game and I'm just like, okay, the youngest team in the league went to Brazil. They stayed like 2 hours away from the stadium. It's like, I don't even count that.
It just matters how quick is Jordan Love going to miss a month? Is he able to come back in a week? I mean, they kind of slow played us this week. Clearly he wasn't going to play, but is he closer to being ready next week, or is he still a month away? Like, if they can get him back in 2 or 3 weeks and just go 500 with Malik Willis, they'd be off and running. And you'd be like, oh yeah, they were like at the beginning of the season, I like him to be in the playoffs.
Former NFL scout. His podcast is 3 and Out. He's as good as they get. We crushed it, buddy. I'm going to go watch the Bears.
Same.